The world was a tapestry of cold white and searing, unbearable red. That's all I knew. The snow fell in heavy, silent sheets, each flake a tiny, cold kiss on my skin, but I couldn't feel them anymore. The only sensation was the fire in my belly, the terrible, wet warmth spreading beneath my trembling hands. I was crawling. Why was I crawling? The thought was distant, a faint echo in the roaring sea of pain. My name is Ilara. I had to remember that. Ilara. My fingers, numb and torn, clawed at the frozen earth, dragging my broken body forward 1 impossible inch at a time. The pristine white of the winterwood was defiled behind me, painted with a gruesome trail of crimson that steamed in the frigid air. My blood. So much blood. It melted the snow, a testament to a life leaking away. Just a little further, a weak voice whimpered inside me. My wolf, Lyra. She was a shadow of her former self, a spirit as shattered as my body, huddled deep within, offering no strength, only a faint, desperate plea. We used to run here. We used to be happy here. This forest knew my laughter once. Now it would only know my death. A sob ripped from my throat, ragged and torn, as a fresh wave of agony ripped through my ribs. Broken. Everything was broken, but it was the wounds across my stomach, the deep, cruel slashes left by his claws that held the true horror. I couldn't look. I couldn't think of it. Adrian. My mate. My beloved Adrian. His face swam before my eyes, not as it was in the beginning, soft with honey-brown eyes that promised forever, but as it was hours ago. Flat. Cold. Like river stones. Filled with a hatred I never dreamed possible. The rejection ceremony was a blur of shouted lies and accusing faces. The entire Silverfang pack watched as he denounced me, declared our child a bastard, claimed I had betrayed him. Lies. All of it. Lies spun by her. Celeste. She stood beside him, her hand on his arm, her smile a blade twisting in my soul. She had won. She had taken everything. And then he dragged me from the clearing, past the silent, complicit stares of my former pack, into the heart of the woods. His final words were not a goodbye, but a curse. Just die here, Ilara. Make it easy on everyone. So I crawled. Because dying wasn't easy, because the tiny life inside me, my daughter, fluttered a weak protesting kick against my palm as I pressed it to the swell of my belly. She was still fighting, my brave girl. She was all I had left, all he had tried to destroy. My vision tunneled, darkness creeping in from the edges. The cold was gone now, replaced by a deep, terrifying numbness. That's how you know. Some distant part of my mind whispered, when you stop feeling the cold, the end is very near. I collapsed, my face pressing into the snow. It felt like down. I wanted to sleep, just for a moment. Then, through the haze, a memory surfaced. Old Anya, our pack seer, her milky eyes seeing things we could not. She'd gripped my hand months ago, her voice urgent. When the snow drinks your blood and you have lost all hope, child, that is not your end. It is your beginning. Hold on until the Storm King finds you. I dismissed it as the ramblings of age, but now with the darkness swallowing me, her words were the only rope left. The Storm King, a fairy tale, a myth. My hand stayed pressed to my belly, a final shield for my child. The snow began to cover me, a white shroud. From a vast distance, a wolf howled. It was not a Silverfang howl. It was deeper, wilder, a sound that vibrated in my bones and made Lyra stir with a forgotten instinct. The last thing I felt was not a sound, but a tremor. The ground beneath me shuddered with the force of footsteps, heavy, purposeful, running towards me with impossible speed. Then, nothing. The Alpha King, Kalen, known to some as the Storm Lord of the Black Wood, felt the compulsion like a physical blow to his chest. He'd been patrolling his kingdom's northern border, seeking the solitude that 3 centuries of rule sometimes demanded, when every instinct screamed at him to run. North. Now. Without a second thought, he shifted mid-stride, his massive obsidian-furred wolf form tearing through the forest, a blur of shadow and power. The border to Silverfang territory was close. He rarely crossed it, having little patience for the young, arrogant Alpha Adrian. But this pull was not about politics. It was primal, urgent. The scent hit him 50 yards from the border markers, and his world tilted. Blood. Mate blood. The bond, dormant for 300 lonely years, didn't just snap into place, it erupted. It was a tidal wave of recognition, of desperate, possessive need that forced him back into his human form, crashing to his knees in the snow. She's here, my mate, dying. He ran faster than the wind, a king brought low by a single fragile life. He found her almost buried, a small, broken doll in a spreading halo of red. Her dark hair fanned around her, her skin the color of chalk, one hand fiercely protecting the curve of her pregnant belly. His heart, an organ he thought had turned to stone ages ago, clenched with the terror he had never known. He fell beside her, fingers finding a pulse so faint it was a mere whisper against his skin. No, the word was a raw alpha command to the moon itself. You do not have my permission to leave. Gently, so gently, he gathered her into his arms. She was ice. The rage that ignited in him then was older than the mountains, a promise of vengeance so deep it stained his soul. But it would wait. She came first. I have you now, my mate. You are safe. He ran for home, for his fortress, his power flowing into her through the fragile new bond, a lifeline he refused to break. He did not see the treacherous ice on the riverbank ahead. He did not feel the shift beneath his feet until it was too late. His boot slipped, and for a heart-stopping second, the precious burden in his arms was jolted, and he stumbled, nearly falling. He caught himself, holding her tighter, his breath coming in ragged hasps. The fear was a living thing inside him. He had almost dropped her. He, the mighty Storm Lord, had almost failed her before he even began. "Forgive me," he whispered, his voice thick. "I will not fail you again." And as he raced toward the glowing lights of his distant stronghold, he made a vow to the night. He would save her, he would protect her child, and he would burn the world of a man who did this. Consciousness returned, not with a jolt, but as a slow, painful tide. The first thing I became aware of was warmth, deep, enveloping warmth that seeped into bones I thought would never be warm again. Then came the scent, not pine and blood, but clean linen, burning cedar wood, and something else, something wild and powerful, and inexplicably safe. I opened my eyes to a world of soft gray stone and dancing firelight. A vaulted ceiling arched high above me. I was in a massive bed, buried under furs of incredible softness. My hand flew to my stomach. The swell was still there. A frantic, fluttering kick answered my touch. A sob of pure relief choked me. "She is well," a voice said, deep and calm, but it held the rumble of distant thunder. "She is a fighter, like her mother." I turned my head. He sat in a high-backed chair near the fireplace, a silhouette against the flames. As he leaned forward, the light revealed him. He was immense, not just tall, but broad, with a presence that seemed to fill the room. His hair was the color of a raven's wing, touched with silver at the temples, and his eyes were the stormy gray of a winter sky, watching me with an intensity that stole my breath. The mate bond. It hummed between us, a new, fragile thread. But it felt nothing like the bond with Adrian. That one had been bright and eager. This one felt ancient, deep, and unbreakable as bedrock. It terrified me. "Who are you?" My voice was a rasp, my throat raw from disuse and remembered screams. "I am Kalen," he said, "Alpha of the Blackwood Kingdom. This is my home. You are under my protection." The Storm King, Anya's prophecy echoed. My mind reeled. You found me?" I did. A single, solid confirmation that had changed everything. "You are safe here, Alara. No one will harm you or your child. That is my vow." He rose, and I instinctively flinched back into the pillows. He froze, his expression shifting, the storm in his eyes gentled to a soft, regretful rain. He took a deliberate step back, giving me space. "I have had food brought. You must be weak." He gestured to a small table by the bed where a simple broth, bread, and tea steamed gently. "Can you sit?" With great effort, I pushed myself up. Every muscle protested, a symphony of pain. He did not move to help me, though I saw his hands twitch at his sides. He was giving me control. The gesture, small as it was, untied a knot of fear inside me. I ate in silence, the simple broth tasting like life itself. He did not press me with questions. He simply watched the fire, his presence a steady, silent anchor in the room. When I finished, I found the courage to speak. "My pack, Adrian, they think I'm dead." "The man who is no longer your mate left you for dead. His thoughts are irrelevant." "He will come for her," I whispered, my hand returning to my belly. "He wanted her gone, but he said something about bloodlines, about her being valuable." The storm returned to Kaylin's eyes, lightning quick and dangerous. "He knows what she is." "What is she?" I asked, desperation clawing at me. "What am I?" Kaylin looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth I could bear. "Your daughter carries a legacy thought extinct, the blood of the moon touched. It grants resistance to silver, affinity for lunar magic, inherent strength. It is a power covets by tyrants and fools. It is why he tried to kill you publicly, but may have deliberately left the rejection unfinished. He doesn't want you. He wants a vessel for the heir he could claim." The pieces snapped together with horrible clarity. The public rejection, the private slaughter, it was all a grotesque scheme. My value was only in my womb. The pain of that betrayal was a fresh wound. Tears I thought I had none of spilled over. I cried silently, for the love I thought was real, for the pack that abandoned me, for the terrifying legacy my child now bore. Kaylin did not come closer. He did not offer empty platitudes. From across the room, his voice was a low, steady promise. "Listen to me, Alara. That legacy is not a curse. It is a gift, and it is hers, not his. He will not touch her. I will see the entire Silver Fang pack turn to ash before I let him near either of you." The conviction in his voice was absolute. It didn't erase my fear, but it built a wall against it. For the first time since the snow, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. It was thin and fragile, but it was there. A tentative knock sounded at the door. A kind-faced older woman entered, her eyes warm. "My lady, I am Alara, the head healer. May I check on you and the little one?" I nodded, pulling the furs closer. Kaylin stood. "I will be right outside," he said, his gaze holding mine for a heartbeat longer before he turned and left, pulling the heavy door shut behind him. As Alara's gentle hands glowed with soothing healing magic, I stared at the door. Outside, a king stood guard. For me, a broken, pregnant stranger. The mate bond hummed, a quiet, persistent song of something new and terrifyingly possible. The Fortress of Shadows, it seemed, was the first place in a long time that felt like it could be a refuge. The days in Blackwood Keep settled into a fragile rhythm. My body, under Alara's diligent care and Kaylin's silent, watchful protection, began the slow journey of healing. The physical wounds closed, leaving faint pink lines. The ones inside, those were slower. Kaylin was a constant, careful presence. He brought my meals himself, always knocking that specific 3-tap pattern. He spoke of his kingdom, of the forests and rivers, of the history and the stones around us. He never spoke of my past. He never asked for more than I could give. He was a fortress of patience, and I was a trembling leaf against his walls. One afternoon, he found me at the window of my room, watching the gray winter sky. "The air is crisp today. There is a walled garden on the east side, sheltered from the wind. It would do you good to see something other than these four walls." The thought of going outside, of being in an open space, sent a jolt of panic through me. He saw it. "The walls are high. The garden is private. Only you and me, if you allow it, and the guards will be at the perimeter. You will be safe." The trust he placed in my choice disarmed me. I nodded. The garden was a revelation. Even in winter, it held beauty. Evergreen hedges formed green walls, dusted with frost. Sculptures of wolves and mythical beasts stood sentinel, their stone backs wearing caps of snow. A dusting of white covered everything, glittering under the weak sun. We walked slowly. Kalen kept a careful distance, his hands clasped behind his back. "This is my mother's design," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "She loved things that endured the cold." "How long has she been gone?" I asked quietly. "Nearly 2 centuries." The number was incomprehensible. I was 24. He had lived lifetimes before I was born. The gulf between us felt like an ocean. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," he continued, as if reading my thoughts. "Sometimes I feel like I have been waiting in an empty hall for all eternity." The raw loneliness in his words echoed my own. We were two solitudes orbiting each other. I stopped walking, turning to face him. The mate bond pulled taut between us, a tangible force. His storm gray eyes searched mine, and in their depths, I saw not the fearsome Storm King, but a man who had been alone longer than I could fathom. "You're not alone now," I whispered, the words leaving my lips before I could stop them. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "No, I am not." In that moment, the garden walls felt less like a barrier and more like an embrace. The space between us felt charged, not with threat, but with a potential so vast it was dizzying. Then the voices came. They floated over the garden wall from a nearby courtyard, sharp and clear. "Pregnant with another Alpha's child, what can he possibly be thinking?" "Charity, perhaps. The king has a soft heart for broken things." "A broken Omega is no Luna for a kingdom like ours. He'll tire of her, you'll see." The words were arrows, each finding its mark in my newly healing heart. Damaged goods, broken Omega, another Alpha's child. They were the fears that haunted my dreams given voice. I felt the blood drain from my face. A low growl vibrated the air. Kalen's entire body had gone rigid, his eyes flashing pure molten silver. Alpha power radiated from him in a wave so potent the frost on the nearest head shivered and fell. Before he could move, I was already fleeing. The garden path blurred. I heard him call my name, a command and a plea, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The sanctuary of my room was all I could think of. I reached it, slammed the door, and slid to the floor, my breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. The old, familiar terror had returned, magnified by the shame their words had ignited. The knock came, firm, unyielding. "Ilara." His voice was like ground stone. "Open this door, please." "Go away." My voice was a broken thing. "I cannot." A pause heavy with his restrained fury. "What you heard were the words of fools who understand nothing." "They understand everything," I cried, pressing my forehead to the cool wood. "It's all true, Kalen. I am broken. This child isn't yours. You are a king, and I am what he left in the snow." The silence that followed was so profound, I could hear my own frantic heartbeat. Then his voice came again, softer, closer, as if he too had leaned against the door. "The bond chose you," he said, every word deliberate. "It chose a woman who crawled through ice and blood to protect her child. It chose a strength I have not seen in 300 years. That child is yours, and that makes her mine to protect in every way that matters." His palm pressed against the wood, and I felt the warmth of it through the wood. You are not what he left. You are what I found, and I am not letting go." The truth in his words did not erase the hurt, but it began to soften its edges. He wasn't seeing the damage, he was seeing the survivor. Slowly, trembling, I reached up and turned the lock. The door opened. He stood there, his expression a storm of anger and a tenderness that undid me completely. The distance we had so carefully maintained vanished. He didn't embrace me, but he knelt, bringing himself to my eye level, his gaze holding me with an intensity that felt like a vow. "They will never speak of you that way again," he promised, his voice low. "But you must believe me, not them. Can you try?" Looking into his eyes, into the face of the king who pulled me from death's grip and asked for nothing, I felt the first crack in the wall around my heart. I gave a small, shaky nod. He offered his hand, not to pull me up, but as a choice. After a heartbeat, I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid and safe. It was the first time we had truly touched. The mate bond sang, a clear, triumphant note, and for the first time, I didn't want to pull away. The fragile peace of the following days was severed 2 weeks later. I was in the library, a book open but unread on my lap, when a scent drifted through the open window. Pine, musk, Adrian. My body reacted before my mind could process it. A wave of primal terror washed over me, freezing the blood in my veins. The book tumbled to the floor. The room, once a sanctuary, became a trap. I couldn't breathe. I was back in the snow, the smell of my own blood thick in my nose, his cold eyes the last thing I saw. "Kalen!" Kalen's voice cut through the panic. He was there in an instant, his hands on my shoulders, grounding me. "Breathe. Look at me. You are in Blackwood. You are safe." "He's here," I gasped, clutching at his arms. "I can smell him." Kalen's face hardened into a mask of lethal calm. His power, usually contained, flickered around him like static before a lightning strike. "Beta Cyrus," he called, his voice echoing with alpha command. His second in command, a severe, loyal man, appeared in the doorway instantly. "My king." "Report." "Alpha Adrian and a contingent of 20 are at the northern border marker. He demands an audience under the old laws. He claims rights to Lady Ilara and the unborn child." The world tilted. Rights. The word was an obscenity. Kalen's hands tightened on my shoulders. "You do not have to face him. I can send him away. I can end this now." For a moment, the temptation to hide, to let this powerful wall of a man shield me completely, was overwhelming. But then I thought of the garden, of the whispers, of my daughter's future. I couldn't live forever in the shadows of my fear. I straightened my spine, pulling strength from the steady presence of the man beside me. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I need him to see that I survived." Pride, fierce and blazing, flashed in Kalen's stormy eyes. He nodded once. "Then we face him together. But know this, Ilara, if he so much as threatens you with a look, I will consider it an act of war." We walked to the border, Kalen a solid, unyielding presence at my side, Cyrus and a phalanx of Blackwood guards surrounding us. The winter air was a knife in my lungs, but I kept my head high. Adrian stood on the other side of the ancient stone cairns that marked the boundary. He looked just as he had always had, handsome, strong, every inch the alpha. But now I saw the cruel twist to his mouth, the emptiness in his honey-brown eyes. Celeste stood slightly behind him, her smile a venomous curve. "Ilara," Adrian's voice carried across the clearing, smooth as silk and just as cold. "You look recovered, a surprise. State your business, Silverfang, and be quick." Kalen's voice rolled over the clearing, layered with an authority that made Adrian's wolves shift uneasily. I am here for what is mine, Adrian said, his gaze lingering on my rounded belly with a possessiveness that made my skin crawl. The rejection was not completed. The bond, however damaged, remains. She is still my mate under the old laws. The child she carries is my heir.
The only
You
thing
are harboring
stolen was her
stolen
safety,
property,
Kalen
Stormlord.
growled, the sound shaking the ground. You forfeited any claim when you tried to murder her. The bond is ash. The child is hers. Adrian's mask of civility slipped. That child carries the moon-touched blood, a legacy that belongs to the Silver Fang. It is my right to claim my heir. So he admitted it. It was never about me. It was never about betrayal. It was about power. My daughter was an asset to be seized. Your rights are irrelevant here, Kalen said, taking a single, deliberate step forward. Alpha power exploded from him, a visible wave of pressure that had Adrian's own guards stumbling back. This is my kingdom. She is under my protection. You will turn around and leave, now. Adrian paled, but his eyes burned with fury. This isn't over. The old laws are clear. I will rally every pack that honors them. I will lay siege to your precious Blackwood until you surrender what is mine. Kalen actually smiled then, a terrifying, cold expression. Try. Please, give me a legal reason to erase the Silver Fang from the maps forever. Adrian's gaze snapped to me, and the hatred in it was a physical blow. You should have died quietly, he spat. It would have been cleaner. Now you'll just lose everything all over again. Then he turned, his pack melting into the trees behind him. Celeste shot me one last gloating look before following. The moment they disappeared, my knees buckled. Kalen caught me, lifting me effortlessly into his arms. I trembled violently, the confrontation draining the last of my courage. He'll never stop, I whispered into his shoulder as he carried me back to the keep. Kalen's arms tightened. Then I will never stop standing in his way. He looked down at me, his expression grim. We need to talk about what it means to be moon-touched, and we need to prepare. That night, under a crescent moon, he told me of the ancient line of guardians, hunted to near extinction out of fear and greed. He told me of their gifts and the weight of their legacy. He wants her power for conquest, Kalen finished, his hand resting gently over mine on my belly. We must prepare her to use it for protection, for justice. Your way. How can I teach her that when I am only just learning not to be afraid? Kalen turned my hands over, his thumb tracing a faint scar on my wrist. You are teaching her every day, he said softly, by surviving, by choosing to stand today, by letting me help you. That is the first lesson and the most important one. You are not alone. As we stood there, under the cold stars, the mate bond thrumming with a new, settled strength, I realized something. The battle was coming, but for the first time, I wasn't facing it as a victim crawling through the snow. I was standing, wounded but healing, beside a king. And that changed everything. The confrontation at the border left a lingering chill in the air, a silent tension that hummed through Blackwood Keep. Kalen doubled the patrols. Training in the courtyards took on a new, sharper intensity. I saw less of him during the days, though he still came for our evening meals, his presence a steady anchor in the growing storm. I spent my time with Alara, learning about herbs and healing, and in the library, devouring any fragment of history about the moon-touched I could find. The more I learned, the more the weight of my daughter's legacy settled on me. It was a history written in blood and moonlight. One afternoon, as a late winter thaw turned the paths to mud, an unexpected visitor arrived. The sentries brought word to Kalen, and a rare look of surprise crossed his face. Send her to the Green Solar, he instructed, before turning to me. There is someone you should meet. The Green Solar was a sunny room filled with plants. Waiting there was a woman so ancient she seemed carved from the bark of an ancient tree. Her skin was a map of wrinkles, her hair a cloud of white, but her eyes were a clear, piercing blue that saw right through me. Elara, child of the hidden line, this is Anya's sister, Rhiannon. I have walked far to see the one the storm protects. Anya's sister, the seer who had foretold my path? A shiver ran down my spine. I glanced at Kaylin, who gave a slight, respectful nod. You have a message, I stated, my voice quiet. A warning, she corrected. She moved closer, her gaze dropping to my belly. The wolf who covets the moon's blessing does not sleep. He seeks a key. A key, Kaylin's voice was sharp. The rejection was left incomplete for a reason, Rhiannon said, her eyes locked on mine. The bond, though fouled, is a thread, and threads can be followed. He cannot take the child by force while she is connected to you, not without risking the legacy. But if you were to sever the connection yourself, I would never, I recoiled, my hands flying protectively over my stomach. Not the bond to your daughter, Rhiannon said gently. The mate's bond you share with Adrian. The mate bond you share with Adrian. It is a tether. Through it, he can sow doubt. He can amplify fear. He can weaken you from within, making you vulnerable. And when you are vulnerable, the child is vulnerable. The air left the room. I hadn't considered the incomplete bond as an active threat. I thought it was just a painful memory. How? Kaylin demanded, stepping closer, his body a protective wall between me and the old seer's grim words. The magic of the moon touched is one of purity, of protection. His bond is a stain of betrayal and greed. To truly claim your own power, to fully shield your daughter, you must cleanse that stain. You must perform the severing. I don't know how, I whispered, fear a cold knot in my stomach. You will, Rhiannon said with certainty. The knowledge is in your blood. It will rise when the moon is full and your need is greatest. But beware, the severing will not be unnoticed. He will feel it break, and when he does, his rage will be immediate. He will come for you with everything he has before the child is born and the legacy is solidified outside his grasp. She reached into her robes and pulled out a small, smooth stone that glowed with a soft, internal moonlight. This is a moonstone. It holds the memory of your ancestors' power. When the time comes, it will guide you. Keep it close. I took the stone. It was warm in my hand, and a sense of calm, ancient strength flowed up my arm. For a moment, I felt a connection to a line of fierce, proud women I had never known.
Rhiannon turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Kaylin. Stormlord, she said, her voice dropping, you have built a fortress of strength and loyalty. But the greatest battle will not be at your gates. It will be in her heart. Your role is not to fight it for her, but to be the unshakable ground upon which she stands to fight it herself. With that, she was gone, leaving silence thick with prophecy and dread in her wake. Kaylin was the first to move. He came to stand before me, his expression grave. We will prepare. My warriors, my walls are yours. But she is right. This severing, it is your path to walk. I cannot do it for you. The fear was immense, a yawning chasm. But as I clutched the warm moonstone in my hand, feeling the echo of my daughter's kick, a new resolve began to kindle. Adrian had taken my past, my pack, my trust. He would not take my future or my child's soul. I looked up at Kaylin, into the eyes of the king who had chosen to stand beside me, not out of obligation, but out of a bond deeper than any law. Then I will walk it, I said, and my voice did not shake, and I will be ready when he comes. Kaylin nodded, a fierce pride burning in his stormy gaze. The path was clear now, and it led to a cliff's edge.
But for the first time, I wasn't looking at the fall. I was looking at the horizon beyond it. The full moon was in 7 nights. The countdown had begun. The moonstone became my constant companion. I wore it on a leather cord around my neck, its gentle pulse a reminder of the task ahead. The weight of Rhiannon's warnings settled in my bones. The severing, to cut the last foul thread tying me to Adrian. The thought was both liberating and terrifying. What if I wasn't strong enough? What if my own fear poisoned the ritual? Kalen, true to his word, did not try to fight my battle. Instead, he fought the battle around me. The Blackwood fortress became a hive of grim preparation. I watched from my window as warriors trained with renewed ferocity, as defenses were strengthened, as scouts came and went with reports on Silverfang movements. He was building a wall of steel and loyalty for the storm he knew would follow my choice. But for me, the preparation was internal. I spent hours in the walled garden, now my sanctuary, with the moonstone warm against my skin. I would close my eyes and try to listen, to feel for the power Rhiannon said was in my blood. At first, there was nothing but my own heartbeat and the whisper of the wind. Then, one afternoon, frustrated and afraid, I placed my hands on the frozen soil of a flower bed. I thought of my daughter, not as a legacy or a prize, but as her. The little life who kicked when Kalen spoke, who somersaulted when I was anxious, who was mine. A love so fierce and pure it ached in my chest. A soft silver light, faint as moonglow on water, seeped from my palms. It didn't melt the frost, but it made it glitter with 1,000 tiny diamonds. I gasped, pulling my hands back. The light faded. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was real. That evening, I showed Kalen. In the firelit quiet of my sitting room, I focused on that same feeling of protective love and let the soft glow surround my hands. His storm gray eyes widened, not with fear, but with a profound awe. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice hushed, like captured starlight. "It's so small," I whispered, feeling inadequate. "The mightiest river begins with a single drop. This is your truth, Elara, not his violence. This is what you must hold on to during the severing, not your fear of him, but your love for her. That is the power that will break his chains." His words became my guide. Each day I practiced, not as a weapon, but as a shield. I learned to summon the gentle light when I thought of safety, of Kalen's steadfast presence, of Alara's kindness, of my daughter's future. The light grew steadier, brighter. It responded to emotion, to intention. It was the antithesis of everything Adrian represented. 3 nights before the full moon, the dreams started. I was back in the snow, but this time Adrian did not leave. He stood over me, and from his chest snaked a dark, viscous cord, like a root of rot, and it plunged into my own heart. I could feel it pumping poison into me, doubt, worthlessness, terror. I tried to reach for my light, but the cord tightened, draining my strength. I would wake gasping, the moonstone burning hot against my chest. "It's the bond," Kalen said grimly when I told him, his face drawn with concern. "He may not know how to use it consciously, but his malice is feeding through it. He is trying to weaken you before the full moon, before you can break free." The realization was a new kind of horror. My own soul was under siege from within. The following day, the doubts came whispering even while I was awake. "You are weak. You will fail. You will get everyone here killed for a child that isn't even his." The voice sounded like my own, but it carried Adrian's contempt. I fled to the highest tower of the keep, a place where the wind screamed and I could feel alone with my despair. Kaling found me there, my arms wrapped around me, the winter gale tearing at my hair. I can't do it, I sobbed, the admission tearing from me. The dream, the voice, he's in my head, Kaylin. How do I fight something inside me? He stood beside me, not touching me, letting the wind buffet us both. He is a shadow, Kaylin said, his voice carried away and then back by the wind. And shadows are banished by light, not by fighting the dark, but by turning on the lamp. He turned to me, his eyes holding me steady. His power over you is the power you gave him when you believed his lies. Take it back. Your truth is your light. Your love is your light. That is the lamp. Turn it on, Ilara. Now. I looked out over his kingdom, the dark forests, the distant mountains. I thought of the tiny, insistent kicks in my womb. I thought of the man beside me who asked for nothing and gave me everything. I thought of my own hands, pulling my broken body through the snow to save my child. That was not weakness. That was a strength Adrian could never comprehend. I closed my eyes. I let go of the dream, the voice, the fear. I reached for the pure, silver feeling of protection. I thought of my daughter safe in my arms. I thought of a future. The moonstone blazed. A column of soft, brilliant moonlight erupted from me, shooting into the gloomy twilight sky. It held for 3 glorious heartbeats, illuminating the tower, the falling snow, Kaylin's astonished face, before fading. There was no poison in my head. There was only a ringing, clear silence and a profound exhaustion. I swayed on my feet. Kaylin's arm shot out, steadying me. "You did it," he said, reverence in his tone. "You turned on the lamp." Leaning into his strength, I knew he was right. The severing would not be a battle against Adrian. It would be the simple, final act of turning on my light and leaving his shadow behind. The full moon was in 2 nights. I was afraid, but for the first time, I was not doubtful. I was ready to be free. The day of the full moon dawned clear and bitterly cold. A tense silence had descended over Blackwood Keep, heavier than the snow on its ramparts. Every warrior was at their post. The gates were sealed. Kaelin had moved like a silent storm through the halls since before sunrise, his presence a bedrock of grim determination. For me, the day was a study in stillness. I bathed in water scented with moonflowers, a gift from Ilara. I ate light, simple foods. I sat in the garden, now blanketed in fresh snow, and practiced breathing. In, out. With each breath, I imagined filling myself with calm, silver light. With each exhale, I released a wisp of the old fear, the old pain. Kaelin found me there as the sun began to set, staining the snow pink and orange. He carried a thick, silver-furred cloak. Without a word, he draped it around my shoulders. His hands lingered for a moment, a solid, warm weight. "The clearing is prepared," he says quietly. "The one to the south, ringed by elder pines. It is a place of old power. Ilara and the senior healers will be there to support you and to care for you after. My warriors have the perimeter. Nothing will reach you." I looked up at him, this king who had become my shelter. "Will you be there?" His gaze was unwavering. "I will be at the very edge of the tree line. I will not interfere. The path is yours to walk, but I will be watching. And if you fall, I will be there to catch you. That is my promise." It was all I needed to hear. I nodded, pulling the cloak tighter. As dusk deepened into night, we walked to the clearing. The full moon rose, a massive, luminous pearl in the velvet black sky, washing the world in monochrome silver. The clearing was perfect, a natural bowl in the forest, the ancient pines standing like solemn guardians. In the center, on a flat stone, lay a simple cloth and a bowl of clear water. Ilara and 2 other healer women smiled at me, their eyes kind. They took positions at the points of a triangle around the stone. I walked to the center, my pulse a frantic drum in my ears. At the edge of my vision, I saw Kaelin's broad silhouette, a part of the shadows beneath the trees. my anchor. I knelt on the cloth, the moonstone warm and alive against my chest. I placed my hands on my belly. "Be with me, little one," I whispered. Following an instinct deeper than memory, I dipped my fingers in the bowl of water and traced a crescent moon over my heart. I closed my eyes. I did not search for the dark cord of Adrian's bond. I sought my own center. I found the quiet pool of silver light I had been cultivating for days. I thought of my daughter's first smile, of teaching her to read in a sunlit room, of watching her run through a summer meadow. I thought of Kyelen's steady hand, his vow in the snow. The light within me grew, not a fierce blaze, but a deep, resonant glow. It filled me, spilling from my skin, lighting the clearing with a gentle, ethereal radiance. The healers began a low, harmonious hum, their energy weaving with mine. Then I felt it, the intrusion, a cold, slimy presence like a root of black ice coiled around the core of my silver light. Adrian's bond. It pulsed with his anger, his greed, his contempt. The voice hissed in the back of my mind. "Foolish girl, you are nothing. You come from nothing. That power is not for you." A wave of nausea hit me. The silver light flickered. From the trees, I felt a surge of pure, protective fury, Kyelen's essence, not interfering, but bolstering. A silent shout of, "Remember." I gasped, clutching the moonstone. I remembered. I remembered crawling. I remembered choosing to live. I remembered the feel of Kyelen's arms lifting me from the snow. I was not nothing. I was a mother. I was a survivor. I was moon-touched. With a cry that was part sob, part roar, I poured every ounce of my love, my will, my hard-won truth into the silver light within me. I imagined it not as a sword to cut, but as a purifying fire washing over the black, oily cord. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. The cord thrashed, burning with a foul, smoky light. A psychic scream of rage, thousands of miles away, echoed in my soul. The poison it pumped into me turned to steam and vanished. I could feel it withering, desiccating under the brilliance of my own reclaimed spirit. With a final, focused thought, an image of me snapping a dead, brittle vine, I pushed. There was a soundless snap that reverberated through the air of the clearing. The black cord shattered into motes of dark dust and was gone. The silver light within me blazed, pure and unchained, then settled into a calm, steady warmth in my core. I slumped forward, utterly drained, tears of release streaming my face. It was done. I was free. Alara was at my side in an instant, her hands glowing with green healing energy, checking me, checking the baby. "She's fine," Alara murmured, her own eyes wet. "You're both fine. It is severed." I looked toward the trees. Kyelen stood at the very edge of the moonlight, his fists clenched at his sides, his entire body trembling with the effort of having held his position. Our eyes met. In his, I saw a reflection of my own triumph and a relief so profound it mirrored my own. I had walked the path and I had not fallen. But as Alara helped me to my feet, a sharp collective gasp came from the healers. They were all looking east, towards Silverfang territory. The moonlit sky in that direction was no longer clear. It was stained a faint, angry red. "The red moon warning," one of the healers whispered, terror in her voice. Kyelen was at my side in 3 long strides. He followed their gaze and his face turned to granite. "He felt it," Kyelen said, his voice deathly quiet. "And he has invoked the blood challenge. He's coming. Not with petitions or laws, he's coming for war." The freedom I had just won tasted suddenly of cold iron. The battle for my peace was over. The war for our lives had just begun. They carried me back to the keep on a litter, the exhaustion from the severing a weight dragging me into unconsciousness. I slept for a full day and night, a deep, dreamless sleep untouched by shadows or whispers. When I awoke, the world felt different, lighter. The constant low-grade anxiety that had been my companion since the snow was simply gone. In its place, a clear, steady hum of power, my own. The relief was short-lived. The red stain in the eastern sky had faded, but its meaning hung over Blackwood like a shroud. The blood challenge, an archaic, brutal law. By invoking it, Adrian had declared a war of annihilation. There would be no negotiation, no surrender. Only one Alpha's flag would fly when it was over. Kyelen's strategy shifted from defense to mobilization. The keep was no longer just a sanctuary. It was the heart of a war machine. Forges glowed day and night, the ring of hammer on steel a constant soundtrack. Supply wagons rolled in from allied territories. The faces of the warriors were set in lines of grim resolve. They were not just defending their king, they were defending the woman he had claimed as his mate and the unborn heir of an ancient line. I could not stand idly by. My body was recovering, my power was nascent, but I had to help. I went to Alara in the healing halls. I said, "Teach me, not just for myself, but for them." I gestured to the cots where a few warriors already lay, injured in training skirmishes or patrol clashes. She saw my determination and nodded. Under her guidance, I learned to channel my moon-touched light into healing. It was different from Alara's green, life-based magic. My silver light did not accelerate growth or knit flesh with speed. It purified. It soothed raging fevers, calmed panic, and brought a deep, restorative peace that allowed the body's own healing to work unimpeded. The first warrior whose pain I eased looked at me not with pity, but with awe, and called me my lady. The title, once a source of shame, now felt like a responsibility I was willing to shoulder. Kyelen was everywhere, a whirlwind of command and planning. But he always made time. He would find me in the healing halls, my hands glowing over a patient, and he would wait silently until I was done. He never praised my efforts with empty words. He would simply meet my eyes and give a single, slow nod. That nod meant more than any speech.
One evening, 5 days after the severing, he came to my rooms. He looked weary, the weight of the coming conflict etched around his eyes. "The scouts confirm it," he said, accepting a cup of tea I offered. "Adrian has called his banners. He's been gathering allies for months, whispering promises of moon-touched power. He marches in 3 days. He will be at our borders in 4. The timeline was a cold fist around my heart. "How many?" "Outnumber us 2 to 1, Kalen said, his voice flat. "But they are a coalition of ambition and greed. We are one pack, defending our home. That counts for more than numbers." He set his cup down and looked at me, really looked at me. "Alara, when the battle comes, you will be taken to the innermost vault. It is carved into the mountain itself. Alara and a full guard will be with you." "I want to help," I protested, my hands going to my belly. "I can heal. I can—" "Your duty," he interrupted, his voice gentle but ironclad, "is to protect her. That is how you help. That is how you fight. By living. By ensuring she is born into safety. My duty is to ensure that vault never needs to be used as a last stand." The logic was impeccable, but it tasted like ashes. To hide while others died for me. He saw the conflict on my face. He reached out, slowly, and took my hand. It was the first time he had initiated contact since the Barden. His hand was calloused and warm, engulfing mine. "I need to know you are safe," he said, the raw honesty in his voice stripping away all his titles, leaving just the man beneath. "It is the only thing that will allow me to focus out there. You are not a prize to be guarded in a tower, Alara. You are the reason I have to win. Do you understand?" Tears pricked my eyes. I did understand. This was not about my weakness. It was about his need, his vulnerability. He was entrusting me with his heart, the one he'd guarded for 3 centuries, by asking me to protect it. I turned my hand in his, lacing our fingers together. The mate bond sang, clear and strong and clean.
I understand, I whispered. I will keep her safe, and I will be here when you return. He brought my knuckles to his forehead in a gesture of profound reverence, closing his eyes for a moment. When he looked up, the storm in his gaze was calm, resolved. Then I have already won. The next 2 days were a blur of final preparations. I worked alongside Alara, preparing poultices and bandages, my silver light charging healing waters. I walked among the warriors with Kaelin, not as a fragile flower, but as their future Luna, thanking them, her eyes holding theirs with the steady courage I borrowed from the life inside me. On the eve of the battle, the keep was eerily quiet. The tension was a living thing in the air. Kaelin came to my door one last time. He was in full battle armor, black steel etched with silver runes, his cloak the gray of a gathering storm. He didn't speak, he simply looked at me, memorizing my face. I stepped forward, and acting on an impulse as deep as the bonds between us, I placed my palm flat against the cold steel over his heart. "Come back to us," I said, my voice firm. He covered my hand with his own. "I will." He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the stone hall. I stood in my doorway, watching the shadows swallow him, my hand still warm from the feel of his armor, my heart already feeling the ache of his absence. The calm was over. The storm was here. The attack came with the dawn, not with stealth, but with a thunderous, arrogant roar. From my high window in the keep, I saw the eastern horizon darkened not with clouds, but with the mass of advancing wolves and men. Banners of Silverfang and their allied packs, the Frothclaw, the Bloodrune, flapped in the bitter wind. At their head, a large auburn wolf I knew was Adrian led the charge, a blot of hatred against the snow. The deep, resonant blast of blackwood war horns shook the stones beneath my feet. Our forces, a tighter, darker knot of determination, surged forward from the tree line to meet them. The two armies collided in the open field before the fortress gates with a sound that was less a clash and more a catastrophe, snarls, screams, the shriek of steel on steel. I was supposed to be in the vault. Alara stood ready by the door, her face pale but resolute. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the window, my hands pressed against the cold glass, my soul shivering with every cry that carried on the wind. I saw Kaelin. Even amidst the chaos, he was unmistakable. He fought not as a wolf, but as a man, a giant of black armor and swirling gray cloak, his ancient sword moving with a grace that spoke of centuries of practice. Where he walked, Silverfang warriors fell. He was the heart of our defense, a storm of vengeance holding the center line. But we were outnumbered. The enemy tide, fueled by greed and Adrian's promises, pressed inward. Our lines began to buckle in places. I saw a familiar Blackwood warrior, a young one who had blushed when I thanked him, go down under 3 Frostclaw wolves. A cry tore from my throat. A new terror ignited in me. It wasn't the fear for myself, it was the devastating certainty that Kaelin would die out there, that he would fight to the last breath for me, and it would not be enough. The love I had been so carefully cultivating, the peace I had found, it would all be buried under this field of blood. "No," I whispered, my breath fogging the glass. The moonstone at my chest burned, not with warmth, but with a cold, demanding fire. The power within me, the gentle silver light I had learned to use for healing, stirred. But it didn't feel gentle now. It felt like a caged thing, pounding against my ribs, responding to my terror, to my love, to my fierce, desperate need to protect. My gaze locked on Adrian. He had shifted to human form, rallying a group of his elite guards, pointing towards a weakening section of our wall. He was going to breach the keep. A vision flashed behind my eyes, not a memory, but an inheritance. A line of moon-touched women standing on battlements, their hands raised, their joined light forming a shield of pure moonlight over their people, a spell of warding, of protection. I didn't think, I acted. I turned from the window and ran, not towards the vault, but towards the highest accessible point of the fortress, the south watchtower.
Alara cried out, chasing me. "My lady, no, it's exposed." "I have to," I shouted back, the wind in the stairwell swallowing my words. I burst out onto the tower platform. The wind here was a screaming giant, carrying the stench of blood and magic. The battlefield sprawled below me, a tapestry of horror. I saw Kalen, surrounded, his cloak torn. I saw Adrian's triumphant sneer as his forces hammered at our gate. I closed my eyes. I blocked out the noise, the fear, the cold. I reached for the core of my power, not with calm intention, but with a mother's furious love and a mate's desperate devotion. I thought of Kalen's hand in mine. I thought of my daughter's future. I poured every ounce of that feeling into the moonstone, into my blood. I raised my arms to the sky, to the pale, watching sun. By the blood of my mothers, by the life of my daughter, by the bond of my true mate, let my light be their shield. The moonstone exploded, not with light, but with a silent, expanding wave of pure silver energy. It shot out from me in a visible ring, sweeping over the battlefield. It passed through Blackwood warriors like a cool breeze, and they stumbled, gasping, their wounds tingling, their fatigue lifting. But where it touched Adrian's forces, it was a hammer blow. Wolves yelped and fell back as if scalded. Men dropped their weapons, clutching their heads, overcome by a sudden crippling vertigo and a wave of inexplicable, soul-deep fear. The magical energies of the Frostclaw shamans sputtered and died. The coordinated assault shattered into chaos. On the field, Kalen froze, looking up at the tower. He saw me, a small figure silhouetted against the sky, silver radiance streaming from my outstretched hands like wings. His eyes widened with shock, then with a blazing, triumphant understanding. The tide turned. With the enemy line broken and disoriented, the Blackwood warriors rallied with a roar that shook the mountains. They pushed forward, a decisive, rolling wave of vengeance. My knees gave out. The energy drained from me so completely I felt hollow, a dried-out husk. I collapsed onto the cold stones of the tower, the world dimming. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was Kalen, cutting a path through the faltering enemy, his gaze locked on the tower, fighting his way not just to victory, but back to me.
I awoke to the scent of healing herbs and the sound of a steady, strong heartbeat, not my own. I was in my bed in the keep, but I was propped against someone, held securely in the circle of their arms. Kalen. He was still in his battered armor, the steel cold against my cheek, but the arm wrapped around me was warm and gentle. Ilara. His voice was a rough caress, heavy with relief. I tried to speak, but only a weak sound emerged. My body felt like it had been turned to glass, fragile, transparent, utterly spent. "Don't try to move," Alara's voice came from nearby. She pressed a cup of something warm and sweet to my lips. "Drink. You channeled more power than your body was ready to give. You and the baby are stable, but you must rest." The baby. I managed to lift a trembling hand to my stomach. A soft, sleepy cake answered. Tears of relief seeped from my closed eyes. "The battle?" I rasped. "Over," Kalen said, his chest rumbling against my back. "Your light broke them. Your will shattered their will. Adrian's coalition fractured. The Blood-Rune pack retreated first, then the Frostclaw. Silverfang was left alone. We crushed them." "Adrian?" A long silence. Kalen's arm tightened almost imperceptibly. "He saw you on the tower. He saw his prize, the source of the power he coveted, wielded against him. He went mad. He tried a final charge, straight for the gates. Kalen's voice went cold. He did not make it." There was no triumph in his tone, only a final, grim statement of fact. The monster of my past was gone. The knowledge brought no joy, only a vast, quiet emptiness, like the silence after a long, deafening noise. I had used my power as a weapon. The gentle light of protection had become a force of repulsion, of fear. The weight of that sat heavily on my soul. As if reading my thoughts, Kalen shifted, turning me slightly so he could see my face. His own was streaked with dirt and dried blood, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but they were soft as they searched mine. "You did not attack them, Ilara," he said quietly, fiercely. "You protected us. There is a world of difference. You gave my warriors strength, and you gave our enemies a choice, to face the consequence of their greed or to flee. They chose to flee. You saved countless lives on both sides. You ended a war without a massacre. That is the true power of the Moon Touched. Not to destroy, but to protect so fiercely that darkness chooses to retreat." His words were a balm, reframing the terrifying act into something I could live with. I had protected my home, my family. Days turned into a week of slow recovery. The keep, though scarred, was filled with a weary but vibrant hope. Warriors who had looked at me with respectful loyalty now looked at me with something akin to reverence. I was no longer just their king's mate. I was the lady of the silver light, who had stood on the tower and turned the tide. Kalen was constantly at my side when he wasn't overseeing repairs and treaties. He told me of the surrenders, the disbanding of the hostile coalition, the new, respectful treaties being drawn. Blackwood's strength and the legend of its new lady had secured peace for a generation. One evening, as I sat by the fire, finally able to walk on my own, he knelt before me. He took my hands in his storm-gray eyes serious. "The healers say you are strong enough," he began, his thumbs tracing circles on my palms. "And the pack, our people, they have asked. They wish to formally acknowledge your Luna." My breath caught. Luna of Blackwood. It was a title I had never dared to envision. "I'm still learning," I said softly. "I'm not of royal blood." "You are of the oldest blood there is," he countered. "The blood of guardians. And royal blood is just a line on a paper. What makes a Luna is here." He touched his heart. "And here." He gestured to the keep around us, to the people beyond the walls. "They have seen yours. They believe in you, as I do." He paused, his gaze dropping to our joined hands for a moment before meeting mine again, a vulnerability in his eyes I had never seen. "There is more. The mate bond between us is true and strong, but I would bind myself to you before the moon and the pack, not just by fate, but by vow. I would make you my wife, Ilara, if you will have me." It wasn't a grand, dramatic proposal. It was a quiet, solemn offering, a king on his knees, not commanding, but asking, offering me a partnership, a throne, his heart, and the family we were already becoming. I looked at him, at the man who had pulled me from death, who had given me space to heal, who had fought a war for me, and who now offered me a future built on choice, not coercion. The love I felt for him was a deep, steady river, quiet but unshakable. I slid from my chair to kneel with him on the rug, our eyes level. I placed his hand over my heart, where our bond glowed, and over the swell of our daughter. "Yes," I said clearly and sure, "I will have you. I will be your Luna. I will be your wife." The smile that broke across his face was like the sun after a long winter. He didn't kiss me. Instead, in the tradition of our kind, he leaned forward and gently pressed his forehead to mine, a sign of ultimate trust, unity, and respect. Our breaths mingled, the mate bond shining between us, brighter than any ceremony could ever make it. We would rebuild, we would rule, and we would raise our daughter, this precious moon-touched child, in a kingdom of strength, peace, and a love that had been forged in the coldest snow and had emerged, unbreakable, into the light. The great hall of Blackwood Keep, which had so recently echoed with the grim sounds of war planning, was transformed. Evergreen boughs, heavy with silver berries, draped the ancient stone arches. White winter roses and candles in wrought iron holders filled the space with a soft, luminous glow, mimicking the moonlight we celebrated. The air hummed not with tension, but with a joyous, expectant energy. Today, I would become Luna. I stood in an antechamber, my hands trembling slightly as Alara fastened the final clasp of my gown. It was not the traditional heavy velvet of a queen, but a fluid, silvery white silk that shimmered with every movement, like moonlight on water. The sleeves were long and graceful, the neckline high and modest, the empire waist flowing gently over the pronounced swell of my daughter. It was a gown for a guardian, not just a consort. "You look like a vision of the moon itself, my lady," Alara whispered, her eyes misty. I looked in the polished silver mirror. The woman who stared back was still pale, but her cheeks held a soft rose tint of health. Her dark hair was woven with tiny silver stars and moonstone chips. My eyes, once shadowed with terror, held a calm, steady light. I looked like a Luna. I felt like a survivor who had earned her place. The massive oak doors to the halls swung open. The sea of faces that turned toward me was not the hostile, accusing crowd of the Silver Fang rejection. These were the faces of Blackwood, warriors with new scars, healers, farmers, craftsmen, elders, children. Their expressions were filled with respect, hope, and a warmth that flowed over me like sunshine. At the far end of the hall, on a simple dais, stood Kalen. He wore the black and silver of his house, but without the armor. He looked every inch the Alpha King, but his storm gray eyes were fixed only on me, soft with a love so profound it stole my breath from across the room. My anchor, my storm, my king. The walk to him felt endless and instantaneous. My heart thundered in my chest, but my steps were sure. The bond between us was a golden thread, pulling me forward. As I reached the dais, he offered his hand. I placed mine in his, and his fingers closed around mine, warm and solid, and forever. Before the assembled pack and under the watchful eyes of the elders, we turned to face the massive, clear moonstone set into the wall behind the dais, the heart of Blackwood. The High Elder, a woman as old as the stones, stepped forward. "We gather under the full moon's gaze." Her voice, thin but powerful, carried through the silent hall. "To witness the bonding of not just a king and his chosen, but of two spirits who have been tested in fire and ice and found stronger together. Alpha Kalen, do you vow before your pack and the moon goddess to honor, respect, and protect this woman as your Luna, your equal in all things, the mother of your heir, and the keeper of your heart?" Kalen's voice was deep, resonant, and unwavering. "I so vow, with my life, my strength, and every breath that remains to me." The elder turned to me. "Alara, daughter of the hidden line, moon-touched and survivor, do you vow before this pack and the moon goddess to stand beside your Alpha, to guide with wisdom, to protect with compassion, to lead this people as your own, and to hold his heart as sacred as he holds yours?" I looked at Kalen, then at the sea of hopeful faces. This was my choice, my family, my home. "I so vow, with my healing, my light, and every beat of my heart." The elder took a braided cord of black and silver threads. "Then by the joining of hands and the witness of stone and sky, we bind you as one." She looped the cord loosely around our joined wrists, symbolizing our voluntary unity. "Alpha and Luna of Blackwood, may your reign be long and your bond unbreakable." A roar of approval shook the hall. Howls of celebration, not of war, rose to the rafters. Kalen turned to me, his free hand coming up to gently cup my cheek. He leaned in and, in the traditional way, pressed his forehead to mine, the public, sacred gesture of unity. The bond between us flared, brilliant and complete, a private sun in our chests, amidst the public celebration. The feast that followed was a vibrant, noisy affair. I sat beside Kalen, my hand often resting on my belly, feeling my daughter dance to the music of drums and laughter. Warriors came to bow, not in fear, but in proud allegiance. children brought me hastily picked winter flowers. The weight of the title settled on my shoulders not as a burden, but as a purpose I was ready to embrace. Later that night, as the celebrations wound down, the first pang struck, a deep, tightening ache that had nothing to do with the day's emotions. I gasped, my hand flying to my side. Kaylin was at my side in an instant. "Alara?" "It's time," I managed as another wave, stronger this time, rolled through me. The quiet joy of the evening transformed into a different kind of urgency. I was whisked to the healing chambers, where Ilara and her team were waiting, prepared. Kaylin, against all tradition for an alpha during a birth, refused to leave. He stood by my head, his hand gripping mine, his voice a constant low murmur of encouragement. "You are the strongest person I know," he said, during a moment of respite between waves of pain. "You have faced death and armies. You can do this." The hours blurred into a cycle of pain, effort, and his unwavering presence. When the final, monumental push came, I clung to his hand and thought of the snow, of the light, of his promise in the garden. With a cry that was both agony and triumph, I brought our daughter into the world. A moment of silence. Then a strong, indignant wail filled the room. Alara beamed, tears streaming down her face as she placed the squirming, perfect little bundle on my chest. She had a shock of dark hair like mine, and when she opened her eyes, blinking in the soft light, they were the exact stormy gray hizzy eyes of her father. "A princess," Alara announced joyfully. Kaylin sank to his knees beside the bed, his face awestruck, his free hand trembling as he reached out to stroke our daughter's tiny cheek. He looked from her to me, his eyes overflowing with an emotion too vast for words. "Ilara," he breathed, his voice thick. She's everything." I was exhausted, elated, weeping. I looked down at my daughter's face, at the man who was her father in every way that mattered, and felt a love so complete it mended every last broken piece inside me. We had a long road behind us, but here, in this warm room filled with new life, our future began. "What shall we call her?" I whispered. Kaylin looked at her, then at the window where the full moon, my witness and now her legacy, shone brilliantly. "Saren," he said softly. "It means star, our light in the darkness, our promise of peace." Saren. Our daughter, our future, our happy beginning, crying loudly and healthily in my arms under the watchful eye of her father and the blessed silver moon. 5 years later, the walled garden of Blackwood Keep was no longer a place of frost and whispered fears. It was a riot of life and color. Late spring sun warmed the stone paths where lavender, roses, and night-blooming jasmine spilled from their beds. The sculptures of wolves now had climbing sweet peas twining around their stone legs. This was my sanctuary, my creation, a testament to life after winter. The sound of laughter, bright and clear as a bell, echoed off the walls. A little girl with wild, dark curls and serious gray eyes raced down the path, a wooden sword in hand. "I'll protect the roses from the beetles, Mama. I'm the Moon Knight." "The beetles are our friends, Saren," I called after her, a smile forever on my lips these days. "They help the garden grow." She skidded to a stop, considering this with a comical frown that was so like her father's. "Okay, then I'll protect them from the nasty frost," she declared, inventing a new enemy to battle. From the arched gateway, a deep, warm laugh rumbled. Kaylin stood there, having shed his formal kingly attire for a simple tunic. Time had only added more silver to his hair and more peace to his stormy eyes. He watched our daughter with unabashed adoration. "Papa!" Saren shrieked, abandoning her crusade to launch herself at his legs. He scooped her up effortlessly, settling her on his hip. "Did you defeat all the boring papers?" I did, he said gravely. They were very fierce, but I was fiercer. Now, I hear there is a moon knight in need of a story before her afternoon lessons with Elder Brenna. As Kaelin carried Saren toward the stone bench under the old oak tree, his free hand found mine, lacing our fingers together. We sat, Saren tucked between us, as he began a tale of the first moon-touched guardian, not as a weapon of war, but as a healer who used her light to make the forest bloom after a great fire. He had made it his mission to teach her her heritage as one of nurturing strength. I leaned my head against his shoulder, listening to his voice, watching our daughter's enraptured face. This was our life. The war was a chapter in a history book now. Blackwood was prosperous and at peace, its alliances strong, its people happy. Adrian's name was rarely spoken, a shadow thoroughly banished by the light we had built. Later, after Saren had been whisked away for her lessons, Kaelin and I walked the garden paths alone. He stopped by a particular rosebush, its blooms of peculiar shimmering silver-white blooms, a gift from the Allied Pax on the anniversary of our bonding. "The emissary from the Frost Claw Pack arrives tomorrow," he said. "They wish to formally renew the peace treaty. They speak of you with great respect." I nodded, plucking a dead leaf from the bush. "The world has changed. Because you changed it," he said simply. He turned to face me, taking both my hands. "Alara, when I found you in the snow, I thought I was saving a life. I didn't know I was finding my own." My heart, as it did every day, swelled with a quiet, enduring joy. "You gave me a future, Kaelin. You gave me a home. You gave me a family." "We built it together," he corrected, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "Side by side, as equals, as mates." That evening, we hosted a small, intimate dinner in the garden. Alara was there, and Beta Cyrus with his mate and their new baby. Laughter and easy conversation floated on the warm air, mingling with the scent of honeysuckle. Saren, allowed to stay up late, performed a solemn, slightly off-key song about moonflowers for our guests before falling asleep in my lap, her head heavy on my arm. Carrying her to bed, I paused in the doorway of her room, painted with stars and moons. Kaelin came up behind me, his arms encircling us both, his chin resting on my head. We watched our daughter sleep, safe, loved, and fiercely protected. "Do you ever think of it?" I whispered, the past feeling like a story that happened to someone else. "The snow, the blood?" He was silent for a moment. "I think of the moment I saw your hand move, the moment I knew you were still fighting. That is the memory that matters, not the ending he tried to write, but the beginning you chose." He was right. Our story wasn't about betrayal and loss. It was about a second chance found in the darkest cold. It was about a love built on respect, forged in trials and blooming in peace. It was about a little girl who would never know fear, who would inherit a kingdom of strength and a legacy of light. We tucked Saren in, placing her beloved wooden sword beside her. As we left, hand in hand, I took a last look at the garden through the window, now silvered by the rising moon. From a place of blood and winter, I had built a life of breathtaking beauty. I turned to Kaelin, my mate, my king, my love. "Come on," I said, smiling. "Our story is just getting to the good part." And together, we walked into the warm, bright halls of our home, leaving the gentle moon to watch over our sleeping child and the garden in full, glorious bloom. The end.